relation to how we mobilize data for small island developing states. We had a session yesterday where we offered various perspectives all the way from policy down to databases, some of the key issues that small island developing states are facing. And I think there was a pretty interesting discussion in terms of the dialogue that was coming back from the participants, and some of the key issues that were being highlighted generally were, if we're looking at different types of data options and how we're going to be able to build access to information and data, the bandwidth and the internet issues is a real issue, and it's pretty variable across the island nations. So in anything that's going to be internet-based, how are we going to be able to address those types of issues? When we're looking at data, we don't want to just collect data for the sake of collecting data. We really need to understand format and quality issues, and things like, there was an example that was brought up in terms of global coral reef monitoring, where the comment that was made is a lot of the information that's being collected is basically showing the occurrence of coral reef and not really the condition, and the condition is an issue that's really important. With, I guess, the last 3 intersessional meetings on SIDS that have occurred, there's a bit of a time gap that occurs between each of the meetings. So one of the suggestions that was also being made is to have more meetings that's bringing SIDS communities together at both the regional and sub-regional levels. More civil society and civic engagement as part of these data issues to really deliver impact across island communities. Where is the financial and political will coming from? We can talk about data and information and how that sort of influences policy, but you really need to get commitment from leadership, both at the financial and political levels. And then how do we align to all the all the components of Principle 10? So part of the intent of the session yesterday, there was a call around the suggestion of developing an Ion Islands special initiative. I think the consensus during the meeting was to not necessarily create another special initiative, but to align with the current special initiative architecture and create a special interest groups where the objectives that have been highlighted through this community could then be developed into a number of objectives that we thread through the special initiative, such that if you have oceans of blue carbon, biodiversity, community sustainability, all those special initiatives already exist, how do those outcomes also then apply to the SIDS community? So my name is Aditya Agrawal. I'm working currently as a consultant and an open data advisor to the Global Island Partnership. Floyd, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, morning. I am Floyd Homer. Serve on the Global Islands Partnership Steering Committee and also on the Trust for Sustainable Livelihoods, which is a Caribbean NGO based in Trinidad and Tobago. Basically, the intent of the session this morning, as I understand it, is to try to get some input. We want this to be more interactive rather than, we speaking to you all the time. I think people are kind of tired of hearing everybody else talk to them and not getting sufficient of a chance to talk back to us. So this is your opportunity in terms of the ideas that were presented just before and what's being shown up there. We want to get a sense of the input of really what you think ought to be the priority and the direction we should go. We have this mass of information. We understand what we want to do with islands. We understand the challenges that we face, which is probably not just challenges for islands alone, but based on these issues and challenges that were identified, what do you think should be the core priority action point that we could develop into something as a project agenda later on? Thank you. So the floor is open. Yeah.
There should be.
Is there a microphone for our people here, please? But it's being recorded too.
Up, then we could have a more engaged discussion.
Is that working?
Yep.
Okay. I'm Mark Sorensen with the GPC Group, based here in Abu Dhabi. But one of the things that we're working on in collaboration with the Clinton Climate Initiative and SIDSDOC is called the Blue Guardians Alliance, and that was launched at the Clinton Global Initiative last week. And CIDSDOC was ratified as a UN treaty organization at the beginning of September, trying to pull together member states. And part of the agenda there is focused on resiliency planning and renewable energy, and data and technology is at the center of that. So one of the things that would be interesting to do, or to look at using a SIG to do, is to really be a communications and coordination bridge among different players. And GLISPA, by the way, is one of the key members of Blue Guardians Alliance. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. So maybe one question back to you would be, with the development of Blue Guardians and under the current Iron Earth process and the way that different project fiches were submitted, there's a number of ideas I think that the community is also generating in terms of what the specific needs are within island states. And as these projects get created, and some have already been created, do you see any sort of like a bridge or an opportunity between what Blue Guardians is currently creating and how we can like deliver action through these projects?
Absolutely, and I think in the near term, a key one is that Blue Guardians, their commitment to the Clinton Global Initiative was a $100 million plus fund that is going to be set up to support climate resiliency planning in the islands. And that will include, and this will be islands driven. So this will be, the governance of Blue Guardians is going to be driven with CIDSDOC in partnership with Clinton Climate Initiative. But the idea is then one of the first parts of that will be setting up some kind of framework for self-assessment for resilience readiness planning. And some of the early funds will be going towards that objective. So wherever there can be alignment, either in the definition of those self-assessment frameworks or in carrying them out, I'm sure there's plenty of room for figuring out where there's alignment and synergy that can be had there, and maybe integration, in some cases.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. Asha?
Thank you. I'm Asha Singh, an organization of Eastern Caribbean states. I just have one comment, and this came out from the key issue, the whole issue of the intersessional meeting, and also an input. I think one of the challenges here, and I'm certain that we would have this again come to the review of the Samoa pathway, is that while we have the Samoa pathway, no institutional mechanism is actually ingrained anywhere for us to really gauge the progress made on Samoa pathway. And I think that was the challenge with the Barbados Program of Action. It continued to be the challenge with the MSI, that's a Mauritius strategy, and now into the Samoa pathway. So I think we really need to reconsider an institutional framework that would support the implementation of the Samoa pathway. My comment with regard to the Island and Earth, Earth and Eye on Island initiative, I was wondering whether or not whether we are reinventing the wheel, because when you look at the SIDSnet, the platform that has been articulated to support the Samoa, the Mauritius, the Barbados Program of Action, we have really looked at indicators. And currently there is the vulnerability country assessment that is being done in Cape Verde, and I know that Dr. Bood could speak of that because he recently attended that. So I think what we need to do is, despite how small or how big it is, that the initiative must not be counterproductive, but rather we can look to see where the niches are and capitalize on that. I think the SIDSnet platform is very important, and this is one that is being articulated by the governments as well and supported, and we can look to see how we can piggyback or even support that in whatever we do. What would be the outcome on the INR? Yeah. Thanks.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm Hemsing Harinat from Mauritius. The MSI had just been mentioned. Well, I do fully support what Asha has just said, because this is a feeling that we as small island states, people and CSOs, we feel and we believe that without any kind of structure, decentralized, because if it is centralized, we will have to wait for another 5, 6, 7 years, right, to meet. Unless it is decentralized, where people will get an opportunity of discussing common problems, right? Because I'm thinking of my own small region, which is AIMS, that is Atlantic, Indian Ocean, Mediterranean, and South China Seas, which we call the rest of the world, right? Because since you have got 3 regions, you have got Caribbean, well organized, because they form a block. You have got Pacific, though it's a larger block, but it's a block. Whereas the AIMS is really lame, right? It's AIMS but lame because we have got the rest of the world, that is Atlantic, Indian Ocean, Mediterranean, and South China Seas. And then the problem is language. You have got Portuguese speaking, English speaking, and French speaking. So unless we do meet, we do discuss in small groups, there is no way forward, right? So that's why I raised this question that we need sub-regional level meetings, discussions, or whatever you call it, workshop, whatever. And then we come up with action at regional level. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to be a little bit positive about what we are doing right now here. You know, the framework has already been set. Everything is okay, you know, in terms of the political structures, you know, at the UN level, down towards the regional, sub-regional, and at the local level. The point here is, then what? Then what do we do? You know, the UN has helped us in getting where we are today, but that doesn't mean that the resources to achieve what we need to achieve are there. And that is why we get initiatives like the CGI, the Blue Guardians, the Eye on Islands, and the Eye on Earth Summit programs. This is very helpful because giving you the example of what's happening now in my region of the Western Indian Ocean zone, we have had a project. It is called Islands Project, supported by the European Union, which addresses the recommendations of the UN resolutions concerning how to augment the development challenges of the islands of the Western Indian Ocean region. But that is a project that is going to last for, well, now it's in its second phase, but at the end of the day, it will end by 2016. When it ends, there are no guarantees. So what happens then? Are we going back to where we were before the project was? And that is why we are meeting here today, because we need a sort of a kind of an initiative that could sustain us beyond the years, so that the thematic, understanding of the frameworks that were set by the UN are achieved. Without the resources, without the support of CGI, the Blue Guardians, GLISPA, Eye on Earth, I think we would just paying a lip service to the thematics which don't have guaranteed financial support to achieve those goals. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, Rahana Juman, Trinidad and Tobago. I just wanted to build on what you were saying earlier on with regards to the Blue Guardian Project and coastal resiliency. One of the biggest problems small island states face is actual vulnerability to impacts to climate change and so on. Also, to most of our citizens and most of our economic activity occur along the coast. And what we find, while we've had over the years a number of monitoring projects on coral reefs and seagrasses and mangrove, there's a lack of information on coastal processes and the things like oceanography, bathymetry, things that can advise us, that kind of information that can help us with regards to developing coastal vulnerability index and also in terms of planning, in terms of where we put what types of development. So there's a lack of that. And what we find happening in Trinidad, for instance, we get money, say, from the International Development Bank, and we hire consultants, and they come and they do the assessment, and these are international consultants. But we don't build capacity locally, and we do a small area, and we're not able to basically repeat this elsewhere. So we need to look at the kind of data that we need to collect and building the capacity within the islands to actually collect the data, rather than just having people come in and do it for us. Thank you.
Hi, Dave Lopes from SPRIP, Secretariat for the Pacific Region Environment Program. I totally agree with the previous comments. I think one of the things that I see, and it came out of the Oceans and Blue Carbon meeting yesterday, is that small islands are very often on the back foot in terms of information gathering. We are gathering information because we've got extreme events that have happened, and everything is focused around extreme events. Certainly that's what's happening in the area where I work in Vanuatu. It doesn't allow for long-term planning. It doesn't allow for that sustainability of the data. You're capturing data for projects, you're not capturing data for some long-term goal. And I think if we can get our head around that and get funders' heads around that, I think that's one of the key things that came out of the discussion yesterday, is that funders are still thinking in a 3 to 5 year time frame. And, you know, and very often, and certainly again talking about the region I'm from, those funds are for recovery exercises primarily. If it was structured in a way, they could be multi-use. They could be for the recovery exercises, but also there's a long-term benefit. And it's that long-term benefit that I think we're lacking at the moment.
Thank you. Let's do your comment, and then Mark will do after you, and then.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Keisha Garcia from Trinidad and Tobago. So yes, I agree with what has been said. I just want to build on that previous comment that was made. I think what happens a lot in initiatives like these and many others is that we keep talking among ourselves. We're always talking to the converted. And I feel that where a lot of the niche lies for future work is in trying to bring in those people who may not be using the type of data that we might generate as scientists or whatever, but who need to be using that data. For example, the ministries of finance, the ministries of planning in all of our islands. And maybe what we could see ourselves doing as a part of an initiative like this is looking at how we might broker data that might be available or that might be generated so that it becomes applicable to decision making in a real way and for the long term. And I think that that's really important. What we are not seeing a lot of, and I can certainly speak for the Caribbean, is that mainstreaming of environmental issues into the core of development planning. And I think that is where we need to sit a little bit more. So yes, not just generating data for the sake of doing so, but for the sake of decision making, especially in the areas of finance and planning, I would say, for the long term.
Thank you. Mark, and then Abood, and then you want to do some comments after that?
Okay. There's a couple of things that I wanted to just knit together because it's kind of confluence points. Going back to the last, sorry about my voice, it's a little long week. What you were saying about the Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Finance, et cetera. You know, one of the things that we do, and in fact I'm working in Belize right now to establish or to strengthen the national spatial data infrastructure. But what I've come to realize is we have to change the notion of spatial data infrastructure to smart development infrastructure, because it's their structure. It's not, if you start the conversation about just trading data, you never get beyond the technical people. And so the leadership doesn't necessarily recognize the structural issues when you get away from silo-based development planning, which is only reinforced by the donors because the donors are all organized by silos. And then those become layers because the donors don't coordinate among themselves, and often the countries are not prepared to actually do cross-coordination vertically, much less laterally. So there's a bunch of structural issues that if we think about, instead of spatial data infrastructure and metadata and stuff like that, that's an important part, but I think the more important part is the structural reform that allows the Ministry of Planning, the National Mapping Organization, the National Statistical Organization, and the Ministry of Finance, who typically is the only one that has lateral visibility across all the sectors, but they're not spatial people, they're spreadsheet people. You know, so I think that all those points are very much in line with what needs to be done, especially in islands where things are so critical.
Yeah, in the back.
Good day. My name's Luke from the Turks and Caicos Islands. Again, from all the statements that's made before, they're all kind of interlinked in some way. And I'll kind of draw back to, I think it was Ash's presentation yesterday, when it relates to the lack of investment in some of the SIDS with regards to the data management and data infrastructure systems. So I think in a lot of ways, as has mentioned earlier, there are a lot of projects that has gone on, that are still going on. But one of the key things that's missing is developing systems that would sustain a data management system for the long run rather than looking at specific projects. And after that project is completed, and that's it. So I think we need to look at the needs of the islands in terms of developing infrastructures or data management infrastructures that would enable them to not only collect the necessary data sets to assist in making decisions for environmental management, but also to analyze as well as communicate that data in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming back to Dr. Asha's comment about the Cabo Verde sub-regional workshop that was held for this region to sort of mainstream the VRCP, the Vulnerability and Resilience Country Profile Tool. Now, at the end of the day, it came to the same question. Okay, now we have the UN data giving us the tool. Now, without data, you can't plan. And you can't plan, you can't develop data if you don't know what are you going to plan about. Now, it's a question of a chicken and an egg here. But the point was, after the sub-regional training, was the UN coming to the countries and start financing the program, which had to start with revamping the National Bureaus of Stats, you know? The question was no, that we had to sort of, bear part of the burden of that particular program, which meant that the countries also had to sort of help themselves. In this case, find funds to help the process, help them. At the end of the day, we now find ourselves at a point where we have to finance the revamping of the stats bureaus so they can develop data which are relevant to the SDG goals and the VRCP's tool, okay? And at the same time, try to convince the political system in those countries to embrace a new realignment in terms of planning and development. So again, coming back to the same question, without, yes, there's a political will, but then we need initiatives, we need financing. We need financing. Without financing, there will be no sustainability. And this event is about discussing about how do we sort of attract such finances without interfering in the international, conventions on the thematics. The framework has been set. Now we need the money to finance the program into our countries. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. I just want to add, I totally agree with what Aboud is saying, and I think we need to ask ourselves the hard question. I agree we need financing, but do we need a new initiative to finance? And I think that is a money question. Or do we use these existing initiatives we have to try to support and mainstream all the challenges that we're talking about? I am afraid that a new initiative perhaps may take away from what we have, or a new initiative can really support. Is this I think the question here is, what do we want out of this? Do we want a new initiative, or what is the strategic aim? So either way, we can welcome a new initiative, but what would it do to alleviate some of these nagging problems that we have? Because many of you would agree that these same conversations we're having here, perhaps we had it 10 years ago, and we still come back and we're still at square one. So I agree with Aboud, but do we need a new initiative? Let's just ask ourselves this question.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, yes, I just want to add a little bit of what I just learned, right? I'm from the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean Commission of Seeds is based in Mauritius. Let me tell you that what I learned about the project that has just been mentioned about islands is from somebody living in Seychelles, right? And Seychelles told me, but you have got this project, islands, why are you not participating? So this is a problem, communications, right? So the problem is that regional or sub-regional bodies should communicate not only to governments, because this is the problem. When it goes to government, it remains and nobody knows, but also to the civil society, right? For example, in our case, Indian Ocean Commission knows about the existence of SEEDS CSOs, and they know that it's Mauritius that is coordinating the SEED CSOs for the Ames region. So the problem is communications, and it's not passing through. Thank you.
let's do maybe one more comment, and then we'll sort of summarize.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to come back to the big picture here. You know, we are already addressing the international frameworks that started since in Barbados, Mauritius, now Samoa. What we are doing in the regions and sub-regions is not to change the process or the system, is to find ways to accelerate the engagement of the themes that are already there in the seats, if you like it, conventions, and of course with respect to the SDGs. You know, now with regards to the Islands project, it is based in Mauritius, run by the Indian Ocean Commission. It has all the countries of the Commission plus Zanzibar, you know, and there are direct communications between the IOC and the government of Mauritius. They have a national focal point, and I think communications, yes, may be a challenge, but I think we are sort of focusing on ways to accelerate all these international, equations concerning seeds. It isn't about changing the system. My concern now is that by 2016, if the Indian Ocean Commission doesn't have any other alternative framework that could sustain the program that is aimed at addressing UN concerns on accelerating development in the Western Indian Ocean region, then we are in deep trouble. And that is why GLISPA, the Blue Guardians, the CGI, and other potential donors here at the Iron Out Summit, need to consider and look at the bigger picture for the future development, of the region and for all seeds. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We just have a few minutes more before we wrap up here. Just one observation in terms of the comments and in terms of the data needs and the type of data. There is an opportunity in each country using whether it's your Bureau for Data and Data Management or your Central Statistical Office or your Department of Statistics or whatever it's called in your country, to help them understand what is the expanded role for acquiring environmental information, because not often that these agencies will go back to environment departments or the forestry department as well. What is the kind of data is critical that you have to report on? They just stick with the usual GDP type information that they need. So there's an opportunity where each of us, through our agencies or colleagues and others, can approach the statistics, the National Statistics Board or Bureau or Office, to help them understand, well, these are the range of indicators that's proposed under SGD or under the Aichi targets or whatever that they may not have considered before, and help them understand that these are the kinds of things they need to collect. And I think generally they will be receptive to that. So in terms of the next step forward, this is one step each of us could take to move the agenda forward. Thank you.
Yeah, let me maybe also add a couple of comments. First, let me just thank everyone. I mean, I think this has been a really just great discussion, and I think all the points that you are raising are the types of points that we need to have in terms of whether this is something that we want to move forward with or not. Whether we need another initiative, you know, that's really up to the community. I think the intention of the Iron Earth process has never been to actually replicate things that already exist, but really act as a platform that helps align across other initiatives. From what I'm gathering, it seems like there are a number of other initiatives, but there is this gap that's occurring in terms of the impact that those initiatives are actually delivering on the ground. So if there is the opportunity to create a vehicle and a platform and a community that helps in sort of building that bridge to those other initiatives, I think that's what the intent of this SIG could be. So, you know, it's really up to us on what we want to do. I think what I can do as kind of a next step is I'm passing around a sheet right now with everybody's contact information. I can summarize the notes that are coming out of this meeting, pass that around, and then we can submit that to the Iron Earth process and see if we want to start creating an interest group around that. I think a lot of that's also going to be based on the proceedings of today, the last day of the Iron Earth Summit, to see what the outcomes are going to be and what the path forward is going to look like, and then that's something that we can look into in terms of alignment. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay.
I would also suggest when Aditya sends around the notes, I mean, you may have further thoughts outside of the discussion. Feel free to share those thoughts with us in terms of small incremental steps that you feel each of you can do within your own country to move the agenda forward, because that will be useful, because then that could be the package in terms of next steps as well, and see whatever support collectively we could provide for you all too. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm sure everyone's hungry, so thank you.
Please make sure you all put your name and contact details on the list that's going around. I think it's somewhere by the Turks and Caicos or somewhere.